Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. As I mentioned in the intro, we have an awesome person here today, and I'm super excited to talk to her about her upcoming event that she's putting on and actually the work that she does overall. Because as we were talking about right before we got on, there is so many different approaches to how we do things in life, and this traditional idea of having to do things in a very exact way is not necessarily what's working best for all of us. And I always look at the lens of how is it working for our bodies as women, as our hormones are changing, how as things are going, are we really living our lives and doing our work in the way that is conducive to the health of our bodies, or are we trying to be away from that? So I'm super excited to get in this conversation with Tracy. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, when you first asked me if I would be a part of this, I was excited and anxious, just like I
Yes.
am today.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Um, 'Cause you are someone that I've, gotten to know a little bit on the periphery, and I just appreciate how you jump into life with your whole heart,
Oh,
which speaks to again, the purpose that I hold near and dear to my heart. So I'm
yes.
here.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I also have to say the same to you for asking me to be a part of this upcoming event, because that is definitely pushing my my, I don't want to say safety, but it's interesting because I was thinking back on how I used to hate presenting at all, right? Like I was like, nope, can't present. The only way I could even with dance for a long time, I was like, no, I don't want to teach. I just want to dance,
Yeah.
and then life kept nudging me in the direction of teaching. And finally, I started teaching, and I was like, okay, I've got this teaching thing down. But then people would be like, do you want to present this thing? And I was like, I don't want to talk. I can teach dance, but I can't talk. And then, life happened and nudged me in the direction of doing kind of a lot of presentations around health stuff now, and I got super comfortable with that. But storytelling is a
Yeah.
whole other level of, obviously you have to be connected. You have
Mhm.
to be ready to be honest,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
vulnerable, like, for me, is such a big thing that I think of myself as very vulnerable, but I don't necessarily share that with the world so easily, you know?
Yeah. You're reminding me of this concept of being seen, right?
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
that we all crave that. And again, it's a both and world. Like the
Yes.
idea of finally being seen and understood and celebrated um, brings like a joyous and warm feeling to my body. And at
Mm.
the same time, it also brings up old narratives.
Hmm.
It brings up all the other things of like, oh, what does it actually mean to be seen in
Hmm.
my most authentic self, which is what we're asking storytellers to do
Yes.
in essence. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you first step into doing storytelling, and what brought you to kind of this love that you have for it?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that I got into it by accident, right? Um, for the most part, I think the way in which that I grew up, I learned at a very young age to figure out how to fly underneath the radar,
Hmm.
and not be so much in the spotlight, which most of the people that know me now, that would be like a really hard statement for them to
Yeah,
grasp that,
they were like,
that I
really, are you sure? Are you sure that was you? Yeah.
my mom used to tell me that growing up that I was always stuck to her leg. That I was
Mm.
really timid, I was really shy. When we came to the United States, again, came from Korea.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm, multicultural, biracial. Grew up in a small town in Southern Illinois. We
Mm.
stuck out like a sore thumb. So
Yeah.
again,
How old were you when you moved here?
I was about 10.
10. Okay.
Yeah. And so I learned from a very young age to really figure out how to blend in, be a wallflower. And somewhere along the way, I found that being funny and using humor also alleviated
Mm.
kind of the having people really know who I was.
Hmm.
Again, the stories, the narratives that I was holding on to growing up in that space was um, there were parts of me that didn't need to be seen, didn't
Right.
need to be shared because they might not like it if they
Right.
listened to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward into my adult life, I really attribute going to graduate school in 2014. It was kind of my um, low risk, high gain kind of situation,
Mm.
where I felt like, okay, this is the time where in because I went to school for clinical social work. Um,
Whew,
and so
that's intense.
time well, I've been working in the field of mental health, right?
Yep.
For a while. So anyway, um, what I started noticing for myself is I would go and listen to all of these wonderful speakers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very inspirational, and motivational. And it seemed like such a far-fetched lifestyle or experience
Mm.
for me to even aspire to achieve. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it and in those moments where they really dropped into their bodies and got vulnerable and talked about the messy parts of their
Mm-hmm.
lives, that's when I was just like, oh, I can
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
resonates with me.
Yeah.
Um, and if I had conversations with people, I started again. The reason why I say accidental is because I got really good at deflecting, right? I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want people to know about me, so I got really great at asking questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then
I know that well. I'm the same
yes,
way. Yeah.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And so by asking questions, it was all about deflecting. But then I started noticing that in those moments that I would ask the questions, do you ever walk away from a conversation where you're just like, gosh, I wish I would have asked, them more about this, or
Mm-hmm.
when they said this, what did they mean by that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I started asking those questions, and what I
Mm.
realized was it would take me into a whole different conversation with human beings that I would have never known
Yeah.
that part of them,
Yep.
and then B, I would have never known that that part of them somehow connected to a part of me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's a long-winded way of saying I think there's great importance in storytelling because,
Mm-hmm.
again, people see themselves reflected.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I hope to be cultivating in the world is really awakening that story chaser within all of us,
Mm-hmm.
so that we aren't walking away from situations wondering about things,
Mm-hmm.
that we are taking notice of the nonverbal cues, we are
Mm-hmm.
taking notice of things that pop up for us, and having the courage to lean in and ask those questions.
Mm, yeah,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. And it makes sense from the mental health perspective, the clinical social work perspective too, right? This sort of holistic approach to storytelling, because it's not
Yeah.
all in what comes out of our mouth, right? It's all of these different aspects of the self. And as you were talking, I was thinking about something, a touchstone maybe for a lot of people is Humans of New York. A lot of people know about that, right? And I think the success of Humans of New York has been about what you're talking about, right? It's if you read a lot of those, Facebook, he has a Facebook group for it, and I'm sure it's on other social media too, but most of those people don't realize that they have a story
Yeah.
until it's reflected back to them based on him sitting there and just asking some questions, and recording that, and then taking some pictures, and then these are quote unquote normal everyday human beings that are just walking around New York, and we really start to see that each of us have not just one story, but a depth and breadth of so many stories inside of us that we may not realize that are there.
Yeah. Well, and the more we ask about those subtleties, and the more we get into I call it like the meaty part
Mm-hmm.
of what's not being said, but also
Mm-hmm.
open up the doorway for that
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. I can't help but think that again, not only do you see yourself reflected in those stories, but
Mm-hmm.
I think about this like this incredible bond that we can experience with someone, because again, we're humans who are wired to put things and situations and people into categories, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, And so there are people who might not look like us. There are
Mm-hmm.
people who might not have, grown up in the same environment as us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do it too, right? Where I automatically assume things about individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're really elevating the ways in which we are engaging and listening to people and investing in people, that's what I'm talking about with story change, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you get to find out that somebody sitting across the table from you that you would have never thought um, could understand what it was like for you, maybe in relationships or in work
Mm-hmm.
experiences or growing up. All of a sudden, you're like, I didn't experience that the way that this person did, but man, the way they talk about what they felt, uh,
Mm-hmm.
how they
Mm-hmm.
process things,
Mm-hmm.
thoughts that came through their minds. I can relate to that on such a deep level. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the part I want to encourage more people to. Um, I want to create a platform for people to share those parts of them. And I think I sent this to you and the other speakers in an email. I'm not looking for a 30-minute sitcom ending
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where everything gets tied up neatly in a bow because that's not reality.
Right.
But the world has been taught that that's reality, right? It's the rags
Mm-hmm.
to riches story. It's
Mm-hmm.
the I conquered it all story.
Yeah.
And what I want folks to understand is like these stories, these lived experiences that we're going through, they're actually the norm. So the
Mm-hmm.
more we
Mm-hmm.
start talking about it, the less foreign it gets, the less isolating it gets. I think it opens up a different pathway for connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think about even some of the sort of big storytelling, maybe podcasts or, different things out there, a lot of them still have that like nice bow tie at the end, right? And while that can certainly make you feel good and inspired sometimes, it is, I think about the stories where there isn't a definitive ending that really make you think on a different level, and really kind of sit and process things on a different level, because a lot of times it's not going the way that you think it's going to go because we're so used to those kind of pretty endings or, bring it all together. And, I've been working on my story for the upcoming event, and it's really interesting sitting with just some of the emotions that are coming up for me around, around an experience that I won't tell it all right now, but basically an experience that I had, and that I thought about a lot, but then this is making me still think about it from a different perspective and a different like emotional perspective, because it's like, well, and how can I bring this together in a way that other people can understand,
Yeah.
and I think that lens, because then that makes me think about more, well, how can I understand this, how can I put a deeper layer of understanding, because many of these situations that happen for us, we're not okay, I've taken care of that, I've healed that, we're all done, as we like to act like society is all
Yes.
about. And I talk about this a lot with my clients and women that come into my practice, is trauma is not going to just be gone, even if you've worked on it in therapy, there is layers to it. It's like an onion, and from my perspective, we're going to work with it in different ways throughout our lives. It's not going to hold us necessarily in the same way, and there's definitely healing each time, but this idea that you're just going to get it to be gone is
Yeah.
not the reality of being human, right? And so I think coming back again and again to these stories of people's experiences and realizing it isn't that end, that this is another layer to it.
Yeah.
And we're going to learn something else along the way too.
Yeah. That's so important because I think, again, the world in which we live, we are conditioned, I'm going to say, conditioned to believe that you, whatever is wrong or whatever the
Mm-hmm.
issue challenge is, you work on it, you
Yep.
work through it, and then you're
Yep.
done and
And I'm
move on.
done. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I don't know about you, but I can find myself in that cycle of like, gosh, Tracy, you should know better.
Yeah.
Like you've worked
You've
on
been
this.
here. You've been here. You've done this.
how is it that is coming up? And so it's such a great reminder for folks like, no, this is something that's going to come up throughout.
Yes.
Um, and, you know, there was a wonderful therapist with whom I worked just many, many years ago. And she used to talk about the fact that, like, you know, think about your path being like an open road where you just developed these grooves, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, on this open land, and this is just the road that you traveled, right,
Mm-hmm.
for many, many years, and you've
Mm-hmm.
grown accustomed to it. And now that road no longer serves you. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to create a different path. Um, and sometimes you can get a little bit further into a different path, but you're so conditioned and so used to going
Mm-hmm.
along that original one that no wonder, you know, we end up falling back into our old patterns sometimes. And so it's something that I try to remind myself of over and over again when I'm catching myself being like, well,
Yeah.
this is you know better, you should
Yeah.
do better, and why are you here?
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love that explanation of it, because that kind of directly corresponds with what's going on in the brain, right? Is like we have all those neural pathways that have been firing in this way for so long, and so to create those new ones, it's like those old ones are still strong as we're creating those new ones. So sometimes we really can fall back into those old patterns, literal patterns in our brain, right? And to think of the body as it was set in the first place to protect us. It was never to hurt us, and I remind women this again and again, because particularly, and I will, throughout our conversation, I'll bring it back to hormones and things like that
Yes.
at different
Yes.
points. But, there, women can get really caught in a lot of blame with their bodies, right? And anger, and totally understandable. But everything that's happening in your body is, comes from a protection mechanism. It
Right.
ultimately wants you to be healthy, to feel good, all of those things. And it's, unfortunately, the trauma that we've experienced in our lives, the chemicals that we experience. I mean, I won't go off on all that tangent, but are going to create these things that come up, right? That are our bodies sort of letting us know something is wrong. And we
Yeah.
need to, make some shifts in some form or fashion. But I
Yeah.
also, going back to what you were saying about, falling into these sort of old patterns, I think sometimes we can make it worse by stressing out of the fact
Yes.
that we fell into those old patterns, right? And here we go with cortisol, our stress hormone, going up higher because we're stressed because of that, versus that, okay, I'm going to breathe into this and accept that this is something that is, has come up in my life again, and there's something for me to still work with here. And
Mhm.
I know that's easier said than done. I know that in the moment you're just like, but the acceptance actually leads to sort of a down regulation of that cortisol,
Yeah. No, you're reminding me of, again, there are things in my life that when I'm presented with it, and I say to others, like if I want to vomit, I usually try to say yes to it because
Yes.
it's a way to tell me like, okay, I need to be a part of this, which
Yeah.
a friend of mine, Becca Lee, she's a strength and conditioning coach, and
Mm-hmm.
she asked me to be a part of a relay team.
Mm.
I don't run. I am not a runner, right? And I said yes because it made me
Mm.
vomit just
Yep.
thinking of. And what's been great, one of the great things, right? Many benefits to being a part of this because we are running together, we
Mm.
are conditioning together, and it's been fascinating to have conversations about perimenopause, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm so excited that you have put information out there. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of like, these are everyday things that, especially we, as, you know, individuals who've been assigned female at birth, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These are the things that we are going through.
Yep.
These are the things that we have to navigate and figure out in a world that really doesn't understand the stress that we
Yep.
experience in our bodies,
Yep.
the hormonal imbalances that happen,
Mm-hmm.
the shifts and body changes. You know, you thought that you went through puberty once, and then all of a sudden now you're going through all kinds of different things.
Yep.
And yet we're still expected to show up at work. We're
Yep.
showing up in our community.
Yep.
Um, as almost like a well put together
Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. Got it
it's,
together. Yep.
yes, and
Yep.
so it's been so great to have that dialogue openly with other women in this space, because this is something that I've never really experienced information about,
Mm-hmm.
dialogue about.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, so I feel like it's just in those moments when we allow ourselves to be like, hey, this is what I'm going through.
Yep. Yep.
Anybody else?
Yep.
And
Yep.
all of a sudden you see the hands pop up, like, yeah, me too. And
Yes.
you don't feel so alone, and you
Right.
are affirmed in so many ways. So,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah,
The connection aspect, right, is another such a huge tenet of health
yeah,
that in general in the United States, we are missing out on a lot of connection, right? Because we're sort of unlike, not every other country, but lots of other countries in the world have much more community base and family base and connection and those kinds of things. And we are very quote unquote individualistic
yeah,
society, right? And particularly, as we're going through these transitions, that is, I do believe, when we need even more of that connection happening for exactly what you're saying of like, okay, I'm not alone going through this.
mhm,
But then also sort of working out answers and working out, I talk a lot about boundaries and how important that becomes even more so, I think, in perimenopause.
yeah,
Getting real clear on your boundaries, both your internal and your external boundaries, because we've often just been giving, 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 giving in our lives, right? And now our bodies are like, no, 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 no more, And so we really have to figure out and navigate that. And I think using community or being in community to sort of figure out boundaries can be really helpful too.
yeah. I You made me think of something that I saw. It was on some social media platform,
Mm-hmm.
either Facebook or Instagram, and there's this and they were just talking about how especially individuals who've been assigned female at birth,
Mm-hmm.
like when we're talking about self-care, like we're not really praised for self-care.
Right.
We lived in a society that really praises us for taking care of other people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep.
How our identities are
Yes.
then wrapped in being a good daughter, being a good wife, being
Mm-hmm.
a good mother. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so it just, again, these are the things that I think about,
Mm-hmm.
where when we're going through the world, where thinking about taking care of ourselves, and I think boundaries, setting clear boundaries, is a beautiful way of
Mm-hmm.
self-care, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think the image of like going to a spa
Yeah.
or
Right. Yeah.
all that stuff
Yeah.
comes up when we talk about
Yes.
self-care, and
Self-care. Right.
I'm a huge proponent of like,
Yes.
and this is
Yes.
also self-care.
Yeah. We're looking at what is on the daily.
Yes.
That is, I don't want to say, I mean, I love me some massages. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for it if you can do that, but that's not feasible for most people to do every day. And it's actually not going to get you to where you
Yeah.
need to go, right? The boundaries are the key because that's changing the moments, the everyday moments of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said earlier, I know that for me it was a process, right?
Absolutely.
I talk a lot about like when I hadn't done my work around shame, when I
Mm.
hadn't done my work around my perfectionism, my
Mhm.
own trauma, things like that. The idea of holding boundaries, setting boundaries, let alone holding boundaries,
Mhm.
definitely never came into, my mind set, and definitely made me want to throw up.
Yeah.
Think about that,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's just, again, my identity was so wrapped around being the person that took care of other people, um,
Absolutely.
dropping whatever it was that I was doing for other people.
Yeah.
And I'm often reminded of, because I fly a lot for work,
Mhm.
often reminded of that safety piece of like making sure that you put on your oxygen mask before
Yes.
you fly.
Yep.
So counterintuitive when I think about that.
Yep.
And it's the same piece about boundaries, right?
Yes.
The the more in alignment I am with my values and my level of integrity, the greater my capacity is to really
Absolutely.
people for who they are and accept them as is. It's when I'm not congruent with within my own values, that I'm off kilter, that I am not in the best space and frame of mind to be able to interact with people. So yeah,
That is it right there. I was like, that's the clip that I'm pulling out for this episode because that's perfect. That's, I know some of my listeners who listen all the time are like, Sheen, stop talking about this. But I think we need to hear this over and over and over again because I know from personal experience that
yeah,
that's true too, and we talked before we got on about this sort of being in your messiness, right? As a
right.
recovering perfectionist
Yes,
and really embracing your true self and how in doing that you show other people in the world that it's okay to be who you truly are, that you don't have to be perfect, and it reminded me of a colleague of mine was telling me she's doing this program with this woman right now that, I mean, it's a little mind blowing, right? Just for me even to hear it. But this woman is at the point where she only sees clients, I think, on Fridays, like
oh,
three three appointments on Fridays, and she charges enough to cover everything because she recognized that she needs
mm,
all these other days of that, for her own personal self-care and the work that she does on herself in order to fully be there for her clients, and
mm,
this can feel very radical, and obviously we all have to find our own you know comfortability and edge with what we charge and things like that, but if you have your own business. But I thought that was so cool that she was very upfront with her program about that. She's like, when I used to see clients 5 days a week,
yeah,
I was not good for most of them most of the time
yeah,
because I was just, it wasn't working for my body. So she figured out what was working for her body, and she's very clear, this is what I do now. And guess what? Her clients are getting great results. She's
right,
doing great. And it's like, oh yeah. So that's what boundaries can look like, and how honoring, I think, to me, again, it comes back to your body, honoring what your body is telling you, and sometimes that can be really hard and really uncomfortable to step into that because it's
yeah.
110% against what we're being told that we should do.
Yeah, you're reminding me of how fear plays this funny little role of pretending to be your friend,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And it's trying to keep you, again, whether it's scarcity, mindset, or thinking that, like, who am I, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who
Mm-hmm.
am I to be able to do this radical change in scheduling and doing this? And I appreciate that story on so many different levels. And the thing that highlights for me is that not only is she listening to her body and benefiting from that,
Mm-hmm.
but she gets to show up in a way that really creates and expands that capacity for other people to benefit from that.
Yes.
You
Yes,
know, and
exactly.
so
Yep. Mm-hmm.
it's not just that she's doing it for herself, she's
Right.
doing it for the betterment of the collective. Yeah,
Absolutely. And that, yeah, that mindset shift is huge,
yeah,
for all of us. So I want to ask you, because we talked a little bit about, your childhood and the fact that you were more shy and close to your mom. So when did that start to shift? When did you start to shift away from maybe the perfectionist state
yeah.
into more of who you are?
Yeah. I will say there was a core group of humans in my life growing up that probably always saw
Mm-hmm.
uh, the authentic Tracy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, Outside of that, but outside of that, it probably wasn't until I got to college,
Mm-hmm.
after high school, where
Mm-hmm.
I got exposed to, again, lots of different types of people. And
Mm-hmm.
even then, I was still, cautious about shining a light on all of me.
Mm-hmm.
Really great at showing certain parts of me.
Yeah.
Um, so, gosh, I am 45 now. I probably really didn't make a big shift until mid 30s, late 30s.
Mhm, mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
and like I said, I think I was already doing my own personal work, and
Yeah.
the foundation was being laid.
Mhm,
Um, and for me, I think there was a point where I got tired of my own story, if that
mhm,
makes sense. Of
mhm,
and when I say tired of my own story, of like, okay, I keep doing the same thing, expecting different results.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm either going to have to do something different
Yeah.
and push myself, or I'm going to have to accept the fact that this is the way that I'm going to live.
Right.
And I think going into graduate school, I just was hit with a lot of it in my face. Like, as someone who
Mm.
in mental health for about 15 years at that point, um, it, being in graduate school with all of these like amazing human beings and wonderful professors who really just, again, they saw me, and they probably saw things about me that I wasn't even willing to see at
Mm.
that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will say that they kind of bursted me open in terms of
Mm.
like, okay, this is a space in which I can feel a level of trust,
Mm-hmm.
for me to just, dip my toe in, like, okay, well, I'm going to show this version of me. And what do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah.
And so to be able to do that amongst human beings that I felt really safe in doing that,
Mm-hmm.
uh, allowed me to do it. I think that that was kind of that's probably like the time in which I became fully open
Mm-hmm.
to realizing like I'm gonna be messy as hell.
Yeah. Yep. 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 Uh-huh. I love
and,
it.
and I'm going to be okay with it.
Mhm.
And I would say again, I think about becoming a story chaser was, again, something that I didn't intend to be. It was a way to deflect attention away from me. But I
Mhm.
think being able to hone in on that skill set of chasing other people's stories
Mhm.
gave me permission to not be so scared to chase my own story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so the more I started working and peeling back my own layers, um, that level of, I always talk about being that friend that I
Mhm.
am to everyone else, to myself,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
that level of grace to myself,
Mhm.
with all the people that I love. All of that kind of just helped me. And now, yeah, I'm still, I still get scared. I
Yeah.
still, get anxious. I still have all of those, those negative narratives that pop up.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that I now hold the resources and the tools to counter a lot of that. And so
Mhm.
I call it my recovery time, right? Like, my
Mm.
recovery time isn't as long in terms of
Right.
like allowing myself to bounce back to where I hope to be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but it wasn't until like my late 30s, and
Yeah.
like really once I hit 40, I just um I think about how I don't know how much longer I'm going to be in this world, right?
Mhm. Right.
It is
Mhm.
not guaranteed.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's the thing that pushes me all the time to be like, okay, you can either do this, or you can try something different, or you can hold that in, or you
Mhm.
can actually say it. So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
I don't even know if I answered your question.
No, it was great. It actually made me think of a couple things. First, I did a master's program in holistic health education, and despite all of the student loans that I still have from it, I think of that program very similarly to what you were saying about your program. And it's actually really cool to hear that a master's of social work program did that, because you don't, we would always say, oh, we're lucky we're in this safe space of this holistic health education. I can't imagine any sort of more sort of, you know, uh, by the book program. We were a little bit more woo woo that
Yeah,
would have that kind of space. So that's really cool to hear that and that you had that experience. And I also think the late 30s, early 40s is the perfect time for all of that to happen.
yeah,
I mean, it's just because, the whatever, all the different events, it's not just sort of that internal aging, it's everything going on in the world too, right? Where I think a lot of us are questioning. I
yeah,
mean, if we haven't already been questioning, then hopefully we're questioning now,
yeah,
of where the direction of everything is going, where our lives are going and everything. But I do think this is the beauty of moving into perimenopause that I like to tell women, this is something that if you can embrace this is a really wonderful time to become more of who you truly are and who you want to be in the second phase of your life, where right now you may still, some women have children that are still young, but the children are already gone, or they don't have children, or they're in relationship, or they're not in relationship. And, there's just hopefully some more room building for
Yeah.
them in order
Yeah.
to step into being fulfilled truly in their lives, because unfortunately throughout history that's not been the case.
Yeah.
you know yeah.
Way to reframe all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes back to like, I don't think that we're fully aware of all the different covert messages that we have been inundated with throughout our lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That really have been unconsciously dictating the way in which we engage with people,
Mm-hmm.
the way we stop ourselves from engaging with,
Yes.
with people. And so to be able to work on those different perspectives and
Mm-hmm.
reframing, and
Mm-hmm.
I heard you say basically extending so much grace um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
understanding for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think those are like the revolutionary acts.
Yes, yes,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so
Love
beautiful.
it.
So tell us a little bit about this upcoming event. I know that it's the second time you're doing it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those ideas that lived in my heart for many years. And
Mm-hmm.
finally, I was like, okay, I need to do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was excited about doing an in-person one-day event, and then COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Of
so
course. All best laid plans and then COVID hit, right?
Uh, I was just holding on to like, let's wait it out. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna be over soon.
Yeah.
So I thought.
Yeah.
And once I realized that it just wasn't gonna go away and we're adhering to a new way of doing
Mm-hmm.
things, I had to sit with myself and think about like, okay, is it more important for this to be in person or for this to happen,
Mm-hmm.
and see what happens? And
Mm-hmm.
so last year we did an all-day virtual event
Mm-hmm.
of Story Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And we invited speakers to come in, our story chaser firebrands.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, the criteria really is make the story about yourself. You can talk about whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other piece is like, we don't need a nice little bow
Mm-hmm.
to be wrapped around at the very end. And I guess the third component is really being open to allowing audience members to
Mm-hmm.
practice their inner story chasing,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can ask those questions
Mm-hmm.
of the storyteller. And so, yeah, it was an intimate group, and I think one of my favorite parts of it was it was an all day Zoom event, and so I
Mm-hmm.
was in no way expecting people to stay on
Right. All day, the whole
all day.
time.
And
Yeah.
so it was kind of like a come in when you want, when you
Mm-hmm.
can. And there were several people who joined at the beginning who ended up changing the rest of their itinerary for the day, because they found each of the storytelling that they witnessed, they had no idea how much they would have in common with it. And so it
Mm-hmm.
ended up being beautiful and wonderful. Um, and so this year I was like, we got to do it in
Yeah.
person. And I just a special shout out to Lori and Barrett of Bottle Riot. They
Mm-hmm.
are one of my favorite favorite people that I've ever come across. And I
Mm-hmm.
love their establishment, Bottle
Mm-hmm.
Riot, um,
Mm-hmm.
in the River Arts District.
You're like, that is my second home.
That is my second home. I call it my cheers. I feel like Norm
Mm.
every time I walk in. And Lori and I have had so many different conversations just about the state of the world, and the importance of really figuring out how to come together as community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, I just appreciate her willingness, their willingness to allow me to, whenever I come out, it's like, I've got an
Yeah.
idea. Lori's first response was like, I say yes to it without
Oh,
hearing what it is. And
yep.
so,
Yep.
so yeah, so we're gonna have September 22nd from
Yeah.
9 a.m. to 5:30. It'll be held at Bottle Riot, and we have beautiful, amazing speakers lined up. You being one of them, I'm so
Oh, yeah. I'm like, yes. I'm super excited though because I mean, I love storytelling anyway, but yeah, it's going to be such an interesting experience to be part of it and then also get to listen to everybody else's stories. And I'm really excited about that component of the audience participation on a different level and how that looks, right? Because I don't think I've been to uh, any kind of storytelling event where that's the case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I had a friend ask me, what's the difference between storytelling and story chasing?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I think the story chasing is really about just not just taking in the words that are being expressed,
Mm-hmm.
but really listening at a level where we're listening to more than just that. We're listening
Mm-hmm.
and watching for the body. We're
Mm-hmm.
listening and feeling the. I talk about like the change in our vibration sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That the storyteller might not even be conscientious
Right.
about.
Probably not, right?
Like,
Because sometimes it's a little bit of a out of body experience when
yes,
you're up there, right? Yeah.
yes. And so it's like, did you know that every time you mention your mom or your partner or your kid, like there was a shift in energy?
Mm-hmm.
But tell me more about that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I talk about like it's not just about storytellers are very important. It's a way to extend tradition.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to ensure that parts of culture stay alive,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And that
Mm-hmm.
information is shared.
Yes.
With story chasing, I'm hoping that people will find the connection between themselves and the storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of resting in that space of, oh, this resonates with me and this is how it resonates with me,
Mm-hmm.
really being able to pull ourselves out of that individualistic kind of
Mm-hmm.
mentality
Mm-hmm.
and really go pushing further on
Mm-hmm.
like there's a story that lies within the storytelling that could open us up to a deeper connection. So
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that people will look for that. And
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about that participation from the audience really does make it a community story.
Yeah.
Because it's like there is this sort of give and take, and each side gets to learn and
Yeah.
deepen the experience. So cool, and it made me think because as you just mentioned, like, storytelling has been something that cultures, that's how they pass down their stories for all, and I do think that we actually miss out on that a lot as people that live today, right? And that's why people do enjoy listening to stories when they can, and events and things like that. But yeah, to take it, and this chasing the story was probably done right in different
Yes.
cultures that we don't even know about, and but
Yes.
it is taking it to this sort of deeper level, and then you can go out and take that out into the world too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm hopeful. I'm
Yeah.
hopeful.
Yeah. So, okay. So tell people how they can get tickets.
Yeah, so tickets are going to go live September 1st.
Okay. Perfect.
We're recording this right now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But it'll be
So they
on.
should be live. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Once this comes out. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so they can either go to daretorise.org.
Okay.
There will be a link on there to get
Yep.
to it, or they can go directly to Eventbrite.
Eventbrite.
Um,
Okay. And
and
we'll put both of the links in the notes for the show so people
oh,
can
great.
go there and just hit those directly. And then, so the Dare to Rise is your website,
Yes.
right? Yes. So it has more information about you on there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have more ways to get in touch with me and what I'm doing, especially.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you anticipate doing this more than once a year, or kind of
I think
wanting to get other people motivated to start them too?
Yeah, I think I would love to keep this as kind of like an annual
Mm-hmm.
summit.
Mm-hmm.
What my hopes and dreams are
Mm-hmm.
would be to have a story chaser firebrand come on once a month with me,
Mm-hmm.
allow them space to do it, over Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
or if there's a space in which I can do it live,
Mm-hmm.
but having someone on a monthly basis
Mm-hmm.
so that people can be, if they can't come to an all day event, that they're at least able to join once a month and get
Mm-hmm.
it of what it's like. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then it could serve as a build up to our summit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I think I forgot to ask how much are tickets?
So we are doing a tier level, and
Okay.
so tickets are $40.
Uh-huh.
And if you're at a place where you can pay
Mm-hmm.
$40 for that, and then we've got a $20 if that's all you can afford.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, my hope is that I don't want to turn anyone away,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
the third option will be whatever you can. There will be a
I,
drop down menu as little as $1 all the way up to 20. Yeah.
nice. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, even $40, that's amazing for a day of stories, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
just saying, if you can contribute more to help
Yeah.
offset, if people can't afford that, then yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Such
Amazing.
such an amazing offering. I'm so excited to be a part of it. Thank you again for asking me to be a part of it and putting me on my little like, oh, I kind of want to throw up, so I'm gonna do it path. And I just, yeah, I can't wait to experience everybody else's stories too, so that's going to be super fun. So
Yeah. And I think it's going to be tender, and it's going to
yes.
be, yeah, I think about these doorways.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going to unfold, and I can't wait.
Yeah. Plus
Yeah.
wine, there's always wine.
That's fine. That's fine. Yes.
Like, if you
Yeah.
want to get started earlier in the day than normal, this is a perfect opportunity.
That's right. I'm excited
Well, thank you so
so much.
much for being here today with us and sharing all this. It's such a good conversation. And yeah, everybody check out Tracy's website, and we'll have all the links as I mentioned in the notes. So if you're in Western North Carolina, or you are, upstate South Carolina, or want to come to Western North Carolina for the day, it's a perfect opportunity to do so. So
Yay. Thank you
yeah,
so much.
absolutely. All right, you guys, I will see you next time.